Hello, this is CRI-TV Beyond the Research, and this is the maiden edition of Women of Science. I have here a noble woman who is going to be our guest for this maiden edition. Here in Ghana, mention GMO and her name follows. Mention biotechnology and then you see her name again. And she is the Deputy Director of CSIR-CROPS Research Institute. And she has a tall list of many achievements. I don't want to go on with many other things that are related to her, and that's the reason why she is here, to tell us more. Her name is Professor Marian Dorcas Quain. Prof, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Welcome again to Women of Science, and this program seeks to celebrate women who are making waves or making strides in science, and is to inspire lots of young women or other women who are trying to give up in their journey of science. So welcome once again.
Thank you very much.
So I have mentioned your name, but we want to know, who is Professor Marian Dorcas Quain?
I would say Marian Dorcas Quain is a research scientist who has a passion for science. I've been working in the field of tissue culture since my BSc in 1988, 89, finishing. I graduated in 91 from the University of Ghana, Legon.
Wow. With
the botany department. I was mentored by Dr. Elizabeth Champon, and I owe her a lot in my expertise in tissue culture. She's the first person who ever taught me tissue culture, and I really appreciate. So in a nutshell, for my beginning from BSc, that is what I would say.
Okay, you mentioned the Department of Botany, and that's Legon, the premier university. I realized that your BSc was in botany, MSc botany, PhD botany, and in chemistry, one would say this is aliphatic, a straight chain. What is so fascinating about you and plants? You know botany is the study of plants. What is it about you and plants?
Growing up, I knew I liked fidgeting with things, and I would like to do research. My father wanted me to be a pharmacist, and he first wanted me to do medicine. I told him I can't face blood, human blood, and I can't fidget with humans, so I need something I can handle and turn around. So the other thing would be pharmacy. And that would mean playing with medication for humans. And that could also be a bit uncomfortable because maybe you lose some lives before you finish designing your drug.
Yeah.
And I was privileged to have been offered sciences at the University of Ghana, Legon. And so I read zoology, botany. Then first year, it was physics and chemistry as well, and mathematics.
Okay. So
second year, I majored in botany with zoology. So my degree is actually botany major, zoology minor.
Okay.
And that is how I came into zoology, botany with zoology. And my project work was in plant physiology. So typically, I'm a plant physiologist.
Okay.
Just that I've used techniques in tissue culture for plant improvement. And then going forward, I've added on molecular biology and biotechnology.
Okay. So every child, when asked, what do you want to be in future, has something to say. But you first mentioned that your father wanted you to be a medical doctor, and then another option was a pharmacist. So what was actually on your lips talking about what you wanted to be in future? Was it something centered around science, or what was it?
My father was a zoologist.
Okay.
He was into poultry farming.
Okay.
And my mother a nurse. And my mother told me that I would be a bad nurse.
Why?
I don't know, because she's a typical nurse, and maybe the way I handled myself, she told me I wouldn't be a good nurse. So at the back of my mind, I knew nursing I wasn't going to go into nursing. So in fact, when I was entering the university, they asked me whether I wanted nursing or sciences, and I said no to nursing. I want the sciences. So. Okay. Growing up, I knew I wanted to do something that I could play with. Something,
in science.
Yes. So I knew, growing up, I knew I wanted to go into science.
So even when your basic school teacher asked you, what do you want to be, what were you saying?
Those days, they wouldn't ask you. They'll tell you you have to be a doctor.
Oh, okay.
So coming up, and when I got to know what it entailed to be a medical doctor, I knew I wasn't tailored for that.
Was it because you were always first in class or among the first three?
Of course, I was always first in class, from class 4.
Okay.
I was first in class till I finished class 6.
Okay.
I completed class 6.
And which high school were you?
I was in Infantiman Girls Secondary School, from Form 1 to Form 5. Then 6th form, I did my 6th form with the Wesley Girls High School.
Okay, okay. So any awards in these schools?
I was a very reserved person. If you ask me to take a position, I would ask you to give it to my friend. So I was very reserved. So those times I didn't really come out. Okay. It was in primary school that I had an award. In primary school, I think in class 6, I won the Central Region Mathematics competition. Okay. So my name was in the papers.
Oh,
the Ghanaian Times.
Okay, page.
I can't remember the page, but I know it was in 1979.
Wow. Revolution time.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then in secondary school, no awards?
Secondary school, we were not really having speech days those times, so I didn't take any awards in secondary school. Okay,
okay. So, yes, as you said, or you mentioned, you were a reserved person, and if any position cropped up, you advised that it should be given to your friends or whoever. So as a deputy director now, and then before your current status, you have been a leader in various areas here in CROPS research. Can you tell us your story about this leadership growth?
I would say as much as I would give, when I was growing up, I was very introvert, if I should say. I realized it wasn't helping me. So by the time I got to the university, I had really changed, I had really grown. I went to the university, and my mates from the 6th form were asking what had happened to me. And I think I had suddenly woken up from a slumber.
A slumber.
I had woken up from a slumber.
And you don't actually remember what situation sparked up?
I would say it was because my dad got sick.
Okay.
And because I took a lot of shadow, I was like, I would just hide with him. And so when he got sick, I knew I wouldn't have him giving me that impetus I always had.
Daddy's girl.
Yes, I was daddy's girl. He called me girlfriend. So I knew I wasn't going to have that anymore. So suddenly I woke up. Okay. That look, you have to face the world and move on for yourself.
Okay, so that's how the story began. Yeah. And it's like every year, looking at your CV, every year or every time is... But did you ever dream of becoming like an institute like CRI, becoming part of the top management? That is when you were employed.
Okay, I'll start from when I entered first year. When I started first year, I said I'll leave this university with a PhD.
Okay.
So I had it as my aim to have a PhD before I leave the university. Then I realized with the Ghana system, it would be better I get a master's, work, and then come back to school for a PhD. So I had a relation who was a senior person in the CSIR. So CSIR was my aim to enter the CSIR after school.
Okay.
And I was fortunate to get that.
All right. Okay, viewers, we'll be back after this short break.
CRI-TV, beyond the research.
Welcome back. This is still CRI-TV, Beyond the Research, and this is Women of Science, and we are celebrating women who are making waves in science. And my guest has been Professor Mrs. Marian Dorcas Quain, and I am Sylvia Artcher, your host. Before we went on that break, we wanted to know more about Professor Mrs. Quain, more about her growing up, her interest in science, and what has led her to become who she is today. So let's move on and hear more about her profession. Prof, earlier you mentioned that you were mentored by, is it Dr. Mrs. Echampong? Yes, in tissue culture. And then you use tissue culture methods in your project work, your BSc project work. And you were the first student to have used such methods. And that earned you a very high grade. Now, many people do their project works, and when it comes to their career development or where they find themselves, they are not happy because they are unable to apply what they learned or what they did during their project work. But fortunately for you, you are applying what you learned with tissue culture till now. Tell us about that. How was your excitement being employed in CROPS Research Institute and applying tissue culture, and then now you have a tissue culture lab, which you were part in setting up that lab. Tell us about your excitement.
Okay, thank you very much. Doing tissue culture, it's because I committed myself to it. I read a lot about it before I started my project work. In fact, the topic had come up during our second year lectures. So after the lecture, I went to my supervisor. She was then just my lecturer, and collected a textbook by Dots on tissue culture.
Okay.
I read through the whole book. I really studied. I virtually studied the book.
How many pages?
Oh, it's not a very thick book.
Okay.
It's a small book on tissue culture.
Okay, because you know science books are very voluminous. That's why I'm asking.
That's not a voluminous book.
Okay.
It's a small book on experiments of tissue culture. And I found it very intriguing. At that time, we didn't have the laboratory in the department.
Okay.
So I asked her that is what I want to do. How can she help me? She said, okay, we'll get it started. So when we started our project work, she wasn't even in the country. So I started a project work in crop physiology using maize.
Okay.
In the middle of of that activity, she returned into Ghana, and I went to her that I want to do tissue culture.
So what was it about that lecture on tissue culture that sparked this whole thing, interest?
I had, that time, genetic engineering was just about beginning, and it was more or less a new area of science that had started, especially in Africa.
Okay.
And I realized tissue culture, for you to take a small part of a plant, put it in a test tube, and it will grow into a whole plant, and you can manipulate the plant. I mean, you have the plant at your fingertips. You can manipulate it whichever way you want it. I found it very interesting because all along I've been looking for something I can manipulate, I can handle, I can twist the way I want it. And that's what happens in tissue culture. You design how you want the plant to grow, and the plant has to follow it.
Okay.
So I insisted, and we started a laboratory together. Okay. The laboratory was virtually a space with a bench and just a couple of equipment. So I had to shuffle between mycology lab, microbiology lab. I had to go to the chemistry laboratory, which was across, even biochemistry, which was way, if you are on Legon campus, from botany to biochemistry is quite a distance. So I'll go there, I'll borrow glassware because the lab didn't have glassware. We had a slogan between the supervisor and myself. We had a slogan that we'll get to do this. We'll beg, we'll steal, we'll borrow to get the work done. Okay. So we got the basic stuff together. We had to substitute things like one reagent we use in the lab is called Twin 20. Yeah. It is more or less a detergent. So we use liquid soap for that. Okay. We did a lot of substitution. We didn't have that fanciful test tubes and
Ghana
closures.
Science for you.
Yes, we didn't have the test tubes and closures, so I went to biochemistry, Legon. I borrowed a lot of conical flask. Then I had to get cotton wool and wrap aluminium foil around it to stuff it as closures. It's not these days that they have a lot of test tube and closures all over that they are using. So that was how I got started, and I was successful with all the challenges of contamination that you experience during tissue culture and you have to discard. But my project was a very successful one. My external examiner even benched some pages with his cigarettes because he read thoroughly through, yes, some pictures has cigarettes burns on, because he had really digested it and he was intrigued by my dissertation. Okay. So I immediately followed it with my master's. In fact, I did my national service in the university and then my master's. So when I joined the CSIR, I realized everything I needed to do to set up the tissue culture lab was around, one way or the other. Okay. I could find it in the stores, in another laboratory, in a dedicated laboratory. So I found it very interesting, and I just gathered everything, and I started the tissue culture.
So that was actually your first office in CSIR?
Yeah, that was my first office, but before I had worked on a private farm. Okay. After my master's, I worked on a private commercial farm which was exporting papaya to Europe. So I was responsible for field sanitation. Okay. So I had that exposure of what the commercial farmer looks out for. Okay, so everything was at your fingertips. So it was not so challenging for you in helping set up the tissue culture here at CROPS Research? It wasn't a challenge because I had started a lab in Legon. Okay. So when I came here, it was even easier. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So now from tissue culture, like in my area intro, I said, mention biotechnology, and then your name is there. What is it? How did the biotechnology story start here in CROPS Research?
It started with the tissue culture lab because biotechnology is a broad area of science. It's sort of umbrellas, tissue culture, molecular biology, even biochemistry. It's a tall list of scientific areas that come under biotechnology, where you are using organisms to create products of benefit to, for human use.
Yeah.
So after the tissue culture lab, I mean, we got successful. We were involved in a number of projects in the institute, including the WASDU. We had the RTIP, ACCIP. We were involved in all those projects. So when I was doing my PhD, I was fortunate to do molecular biology. So coming back, before I came back, and other scientists had also thought through the fact that we need to have a molecular biology lab. So they had given up some of their research funds. This includes Mr. Ofe Bonsu, Dr. Elizabeth Parks, I think Dr. Moses, a number of them. They had actually given up some of their research fund to set up a space for the molecular biology lab.
What did they actually find beneficial about biotechnology that motivated them to release their research funds for setting up the biotechnology or the molecular biology?
They are working with crop varieties. They are breeders. They need information about the molecular makeup. They are studying diseases. They need information about the molecular makeup. They are doing indexing. And the molecular tools come faster. And marker-assisted breeding, they need information for marker-assisted breeding. So they knew what molecular biology, what the difference molecular biology would add to their research. So they committed funds to it and set up the space for the molecular biology lab.
Okay, so now to biosafety, which is something related to GMO. I know in 2011, you were very instrumental in organizing biosafety bill advocacy program for parliamentarians or other groups. The first question will be, has it been passed? And then why were you part, or did you lead for this, for organizing this program?
Okay. The biosafety bill has been passed into a law.
Okay.
So we have a law for biosafety which regulates the utilization of genetic engineering technology and organisms.
Okay.
I was part of it because there was at that time a project spearheaded by FARA, and in Ghana I was the focal person. Okay. That's the SABIMA project, which was looking at stewardship for the safe utilization of biotech products. So I was a focal person who brought together scientists from all the organizations in Ghana, the universities, the research institutes, which use biotechnology tools in their research. And we guided them to setting up standard operation procedures for their laboratory. We guided them into proper communication with biotechnology issues. And it wasn't just for the scientists, it was also for the social, the chiefs. We interacted with chiefs, we interacted with the imams and priests, all on communicating biotechnology and related issues. And parliamentarians were part of the people we interacted with. So that helped them get educated, and they agreed to work on the bill to pass it into a law in 2011.
Okay, we'll go for a break. When we come back, I'll ask more about biosafety and some few other issues relating to it. Viewers will be back after this break.
CRI-TV, beyond the research.
All right, welcome back. My guest is still Professor Mrs. Marian Quain, and she is our first guest on the maiden show of Women of Science. And earlier, before we went on break, we were talking about biosafety, and I'd like us to hear more about that. Prof, you mentioned that when you organized that program concerning biosafety advocacy, you invited imams, chiefs, all those people were present as stakeholders. There is this notion, or there is this fear whenever biosafety is mentioned. How are you able to communicate to these people, like the imams, especially those who are not so technical in this field? How are you able to communicate this to them for them to absorb?
You know, when it comes to technology, we have to be able to break it down into simple day-to-day terms for them to accept, to understand and accept. You can also bring in the aspect of how successful the system has been in other parts of the world. Because when you talk of genetically engineered organisms, what is even a genetically engineered organism? So you even may have to speak it in tree. What is a gene? The thing that gives you your traits and your character.
So how do you break it
Emma
down?
will buying.
Okay.
The Emma will buying. That is the gene.
But with the religious leaders, were they not relating that one to something spiritual?
You know, when it comes to the religious leaders, you permit me to use the example of the Muslims who don't take pork. Mm-hmm. So one would say you bring a gene from a pig into a plant, and that would be against their ethics of eating, that they don't eat pork. But then whatever gene you have brought from somewhere, you have to let the people know.
Okay.
But the science is said that right now you can even synthesize the gene in the laboratory.
Okay.
So you just need the knowledge of the sequence that makes up the gene, and you can synthesize it. You don't have to bring it from another organism. And
so how were you able to break down sequence in their own language? How did you explain that one to you?
I explained it in the terms of traits.
Okay.
So I always use a typical example of garden eggs. I mean, if you go onto the market now, you buy garden eggs, each one you cut has a maggot.
Yes.
And but if you pick like Konsusua, I don't think you've ever seen a maggot in it.
No.
Or you haven't even had to cut it up. So if it has a trait that prevents maggots from going into it, I can take just that trait and put it in garden eggs, and then I'll have garden eggs that maggots don't attack.
Okay.
If I'm doing the conventional breeding, I will cross the two. The trait that prevents maggots from attacking the
garden eggs,
prevents from attacking garden eggs in the Konsusua, it will be in my garden egg.
Okay.
But it will come along with what we call junk genes. Mm-hmm. Genes that you don't really like. Mm-hmm. Now the garden egg I've produced genetically will look green, will have so many seeds, just like the Konsusua. I don't want that. So you have to, in conventional breeding, you have to do generations of back crossing before you fix the gene of interest and remove junk genes.
And that takes a very long time.
Very long time. Okay. So with genetic engineering, you go in for the exact gene you want, cut it out, and insert it in your plant that you want, your commercial grade plant. So that is how, I mean, they got to appreciate and understand. We had to take examples from around us and deliver it to them, And they realized that, good. And you know, these people are educated people.
Yeah.
So they understood it and they were ready to take it up, that if we have to come into their communities and their churches and their mosque to talk about it, they are ready to let us in.
Okay. So were they able to, after this program, were they able to communicate to indigenes or their people, that's the groups that of which they are leaders, were they able to communicate that to them? And then how far with the feedback? Is it positive?
They did, and some of them invited us to come over to give more talks. Okay. So that happened, and it went down well with the people. The people were, it's a matter of demystifying the science. Okay. At times we stay too much on the science and we don't break down for people to really accept it. So it was a matter of demystifying the science, that genetically engineered foods is not like I've gone for fluid from a lizard and injected it with a syringe into tomato, so the tomato has a long shelf life. That is not it. Okay. You actually have to go into the laboratory, identify the exact sequence of genes you want, cut it out, and use laboratory techniques to introduce it into your crop of interest to utilize it. All organisms have genes. Humans have genes. And that is the beauty of genetic engineering, that you can move beyond species. Okay. You don't have to always cross tomato with tomato, but we can cross potato with tomato and get pomato.
Okay, like we have potato yogurt. Anyway, there is this notion about gender and biosafety, or even lab in general, but I want us to focus more on biosafety. Are there dangers associated with, especially females, or well, gender in general, with biosafety, in the practice of biosafety? Okay.
I would say we have to, maybe I'll do some education and draw a line with the term biosafety. Okay. You know, so when I teach, I tell the students there's biosafety as defined by the Cartagena Protocol, which applies to genetically modified organisms. And then there's biosafety, which applies to the safe use of chemicals and reagents in the laboratory. Okay. So when you come to talk of the biosafety in terms of genetic engineering, you are looking at the safe use of the technology to ensure that life is protected and all organisms are protected from any adverse effects of genetically modified technology. Okay. When you come to the lab, you are looking at the safe use of your chemicals and reagents to ensure that you are not exposed to any carcinogenic or, if I must say, toxic reagent in the lab. Okay. When we were growing up doing science, we used to pipette with our mouth. Yes. In the lab, which is unethical. So I would use this avenue to employ all science teachers to at least get a proper pipette, get a pipette ball, yes, and use it in the lab, and do not let your students pipette with their mouth.
At least every student who did chemistry got a reagent down
the throat. Yeah. That shouldn't happen any longer. Yeah. So those are some of the hazards on the job. You should know the correct tools and equipment to use. And that is what I found very critical in my laboratory, because in the laboratory, I want to make sure the operator is very safe.
Okay.
Even the chair you are sitting on, I want to be sure you are comfortably seated.
Okay.
You are in the proper PPE. It is not only under COVID that we need PPE.
No, it was under COVID that we got to know,
yes,
many people got to understand
yes.
PPE.
In our day-to-day activities in the laboratory, we have to always be in the correct apparel. I worked with a scientist who was at that time doing his master's in my lab, and he wouldn't wear his lab coats. He said it's hot. He feels hot. So I insisted that you enter the lab, you wear your lab coat. And we use a carcinogenic chemical in the lab called ethidium bromide.
Okay.
So he pipetted it into his reagent, his solution, and after he found a speck of it on his lab coat. Somehow he wasn't careful with, and if he had not been in a lab coat, it would have been on his clothes. He would have taken it home to his children, wife and children.
And it would have been disastrous.
Yes, so you have to take seriously how to properly handle your chemicals and reagents and everything in the laboratory. So I must say it goes not only to women, but the men as well.
Okay.
I must admit that the women in my laboratory are very reproductive.
Okay.
So far, I wouldn't say that our reagents and chemicals has had any effect on them.
Okay. So coming to what you just ended with, your lab, it's full of women. And I often ask myself, is it that more females are interested in tissue culture, biotechnology, or what is actually the secret why you have lots of female in your section or lab?
I would say somehow I didn't plan it. Maybe I had a soft spot for them, but now they are overwhelming me.
Okay.
So that's my answer for it.
You are currently the board chair for CSIR Basic. With your rich science experience, have you thought, or do you have in plans anything to encourage more of these pupils into science, into biotechnology, or other sciences, not only the medicine or pharmacy like your father wanted you to be in?
Okay, what I would say is at BSc level, I haven't been able to make that inroad, but I think in my position, I've been a role model to them.
Okay.
Currently, I'm speaking to the science teachers to bring the students to our laboratories for them to have their practicals. It will expose them to what is up and what they can be thinking of. Actually, since 2013, I've been involved in outreach, doing outreach program for high schools in biotechnology. So I have influenced the youth in their career guidance and understanding biotechnology. It's even won me an award at with the American Society for Plant Biologists. So one colleague walked up to me, I was at the airport, and he came up to me that, "What did you tell our children?" He wanted his son to do medicine. Now his son says nothing with medicine. He wants to go into the mining and an engineering program at Legon. So that is what the son is now doing. I said, I did nothing. I demystified the science to him, and I told them that there is more to science than medicine and pharmacy.
All right. We'll be right back, and we'll hear more about the career guidance on the part of Professor Mrs. Quain.
CRI-TV, beyond the research.
All right, welcome back, and we are about to wrap up on this maiden edition of Women of Science. The conversation is so interesting that I wish it never ends, but we have to wrap up. We are in the last part of this program. Prof was telling us about career guidance, her role in career guidance concerning science has even made somebody to change his mind or her mind from practicing medicine to something engineering. So with these programs that you organized and where you have had a positive feedback, if I can call it that way, were you doing this on your own, or like you mentioned, was it through the affiliation with the American Society of that organization you mentioned? Was it that way?
It's something I had thought of. I had the passion to do it, but I didn't have the resources to bring the children together. Somehow, when I was doing my PhD, I did part of my PhD at the University, Tuskegee University in Alabama, US. And my supervisor, Professor Marceline Egnin, she was doing something similar. So I worked with her in the US with high school students and teachers. And that was something I really wanted to bring down to Ghana to do. But coming back, I didn't have the financial support to do it. So I got the funding with the American Society for Plant Biologists, and I really got to do it. So following that, it has been like a trigger. I don't need to have the money to do it. They have their sessions and they invite me and my team. In fact, I did it together with other people like Professor James Esibuo, Dr. Ruth Prempe. I bring in people that the other members of my research team that I feel can deliver. So one person who really, in fact, he inspired me to do that in the first place. He was my student, Eric Aqua. He was doing his master's, and I realized that people out there need to be really educated on the role of science and the understanding and the application of science. So I would say he was my trigger. And so I was using him. He was also a biology teacher. So I was using him whenever they call us out to hold sessions for students in their schools.
Apart from these sessions, I know of some quiz competition for students. And how far has this been successful?
We held quiz. It was funded by the project. And it was very interesting. TI Ahmadiyya won. And the students found it very intriguing. And since then, they've been setting up biotechnology clubs in their various schools.
And I hope you are always invited to talk to them or
they've been inviting me to their STEM programs in the schools. Now KNUST biotech students also have been inviting me for their activities on campus.
So away from that, talk about award. I know you are a mentor for award African Women in Agric Research Development. Tell me the story about that, how you got into award.
For award, I had actually, when the first call came up, I applied and I didn't get. So the second call, one of my staff applied and used me as a mentor, and she won it. So that is how I got in there, although the first time I tried, I wasn't successful. And since then, I have mentored a number of women on the award program. I've mentored scientists from CSIR-CRI and then from CROPS research.
Okay. You know, how many people have you mentored, or are you still mentoring?
Now I have 4. In all, I'll say one-on-one, I've mentored 4 of them.
Okay. Share with us some of the cherished moments you've had with these mentees on our work.
Yeah, it's like having a step, being able to take a bold step in their research activities, putting all the fears aside, the fears of being a woman, and the challenge of motherhood. Yes, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And I always assure them that they have to move along with their partners, with their family. That has been my support for me to progress on the ladder with science and research.
Okay, and that's very, very important. Now, what are your views about science in nation building?
That's what I'll start with, because
maybe one day you could become the president or a presidential candidate and be on platforms and hammering on science in nation building. And
you look around us and there is science about everything.
okay.
The buildings, the roads, the food, how we do our harvest, how we keep our food. I mean, the food, how we grow our food, our health. There is science in everything. So for the nation to be successfully built, we don't have to downplay science. We have to have a very rigorous research system for science. I would have my thumbs up for our first president, Kwame Nkrumah. I think he had a very beautiful idea for science and for research. He set up the CSIR.
Yeah.
At that time, the CSIR was not under any ministry. It was in the office of the president. The leader of CSIR was the one traveling with the president. And that is what I wished. And that is why he made so much impact with that period that he was in leadership in the country. And if we had, that impetus had been carried on, and it's not even too late. If our politicians could wake up to the ideology and the way Kwame Nkrumah pitched science and research and set up the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, it will take us on another level. Look at Singapore, Malaysia. Malaysia came for their they came for their palm hybrids from Ghana, and look at what they are doing now. Now we are asking for the breeders' right. We don't have any right to the materials we gave to Malaysia. Otherwise, they will be paying the nation royalties over the years. We have no claim to it because we don't have any right to it. This institute has bred maize varieties which are all over Africa. We hold no right to them. So what royalties will come to us?
Wow.
And it's all because politically and socially, science is misunderstood. Science has not been completely demystified. Science has been misinterpreted.
Okay. So now, you were part of the organizers or leaders who came up with the biosafety bill. That approach, we were able to get involved the parliamentarians and other stakeholders. So in relation to what you just said, talking about science, do you have any plan of demystifying or making politicians understand or anybody understand the role of science in nation building, where the focus will now be on science in nation building?
In fact, with the American Society for Plant Biologists, I put in a number of applications, like taking it to the policymakers,
Okay.
where I was proposing going to Parliament and demystifying science to policymakers, because it gets to a point they don't even know what we do.
Yes.
But we are doing so much. So I am very passionate about educating people about what we do,
Okay.
and letting them appreciate it and vote funds for us to do what we do.
Okay. Now, going through your CV, I found out that you have about 32 refereed journals, and of which 12 you are a lead. And then with your role as Deputy Director, a leader in so many things, principal investigator for many projects, how are you able to combine all these things with family?
I would say I think I mentioned I have a very supportive family. My husband would push me.
Okay.
So I owe a lot to him. My son would give me all the support that I need. I used to call him my excess baggage, because I'll travel with him.
Okay.
For my meetings. I'll travel with him. And
Okay.
if I have to travel with my husband, I'll travel with him.
Okay, so
So
you're doing
I've brought
another
them-
mentoring there.
Yes. I've brought them along, and they have helped me progress, as you see in my CV.
Okay, so everybody knows scientists or people who are in science not to have social life. Tell us about your social life. What do you do in your free time? What are your hobbies?
Okay. So coming to social life, maybe I should mention my name. Those who knew me in primary school, they used to call me Dorcas Quain.
Okay.
Then I went to secondary school. I think secondary school, Infantiman called me Dorcas Quain. Wesley girls called me Marian Dorcas Quain.
Okay.
All because, I mean, I was using the names anyway, anyhow, whichever. If it's my father who helped me fill the form, he used Dorcas.
Okay.
If it's my mother, he will use Marian. Then when I learned that I had all those names, I said, okay, let me fill that
Is
myself.
it because during your naming ceremony, your mom proposed that you should be called Marian, and your dad proposed that you should be called Dorcas?
Certainly. So
Okay.
when by the time of my younger sister, all the English Christian names in the family were finished.
Okay.
So they were naming two at a time. They were finished. So she didn't get any Christian name.
Okay. So, so they knew you as Dorcas Quain, Marian Quain, and so yeah, about your social life.
So social life, I would say, I'm a church person. So aside work is church. I'm a deaconess
Okay.
in my church, a marriage counselor.
Okay.
and a marriage counselor. And so last year, when I felt I wasn't doing so well as I wanted to do as a chorister, I stopped joining the choir.
Okay.
I was going to choir and choir rehearsals, and it helped me a lot. I must say I have missed, but I went into the prayer group, and so when I'm not doing other things, I'm praying, and I pray a lot.
So it's church.
Yes, my life has been a lot of church. My hobbies, I would say, typically I like to sew.
Okay.
And sing, and cook.
And what has happened to the sewing?
The sewing, until COVID came, I hadn't handled my sewing machine in a long time.
Okay, so that means all the outfits, the beautiful outfits we'll be seeing you in, they are all done by you?
No.
Okay.
In fact, when I was being employed first, those times I used to sew a lot. So when I came into crop research, those times I was sewing. So all my clothing I was sewing myself. So I got so busy, and one of my sisters is a seamstress, so she makes my outfits for me. So when COVID came, I went back for my sewing machine and made
Your
some
nose mask.
nose mask.
Okay. Okay, so you said you were part of the choir, or you were a member of the choir until last year you had to. So as we sign out, can you sing us your favorite song?
Yeda wasia efata je yiwaya.
Hallelujah.
Efata we ne free owumo wama yenkwa eniewie ohine yeda wasia efata.
Hallelujah. Praise the Lord.
Oh God.
We just had some worship time in signing out. Thank you so much for your time. Our conversation has been so interesting. I wish we continued. I wish it was part 2, part 3, but my crew are making me end it here. Thank you so much. And maybe another time we'd have to find something to invite you on one of our programs on CRI-TV. Viewers, that is the end of Women of Science, the maiden edition. And our guest has been Professor Mrs. Marian Dorcas Quain, the Deputy Director for CROPS Research Institute. And like I said, mention biotechnology or biosafety or GMO, and then you see her name there. My name is Sylvia Artcher. Goodbye and stay tuned for more of our programs. CRI-TV Beyond the Research.